Yo, I had this friend, everyone called Cap, short for Captain, and Cap was a Marine, and he told me the story. He did these tours in Iraq, and he said they had these Humvees, and on top of the Humvees, they had this like giant 50 cal machine gun, and he said he would shoot this thing, and every time he shot it, it would send electricity through his whole body, and that like adrenaline would just start pumping, and he would just get this feeling like, you know. And yeah, so he tells me the story about coming into Iraq, and he's manning this machine gun on top of this Humvee, and yeah, so he's kind of painting this picture for me. Him and his squad and his troop are like, they're racing towards the battle line, and he's in the front on top of this Humvee, on top of the machine gun. And I guess in Iraq, like, it's a desert, but there were these like lakes of oil, literally lakes and rivers of oil everywhere. And as a part of like a military tactic, the Iraqis set fire to these oil fields. So he said everywhere you looked is literally like lakes of fire, like with flames shooting up 10 stories into the sky, and you know, literally rivers of fire and black smoke barreling just everywhere you look. Black smoke, fire all across the horizon. And you know, he's saying there's like, you know, Black Hawk helicopters flying real low, jets flying over the top, and him and his whole squad are barreling towards the front lines. He said they're flying, going 70 miles an hour, and he's on top on this machine gun. And he said they're all in communication via this radio. And he says right as they get towards the front line, you know, they're all talking via radio, and the radio cuts, and they play a song right as they approach the battlefield, right as they approach the front line. And it's that song, "Let the bodies hit the floor, let the bodies hit the floor, let the bodies hit the floor." And he said he just starts spraying his machine gun, and I'm sitting there, and my jaw is literally like on the floor. Like, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, I remember the first time I met Cap. I met him in rehab, and it was my first night. And basically, I get assigned this dorm. And my first night in, they do this like introduction, right? Where all the guys sit in a big circle, and they start like introducing themselves to me. So they would say like, you know, their name, where they're from, how long they've been there. It's a year-long program. Basically like how they got in this mess, and their experience. So first, I think I noticed something about Cap is that you know he's a Marine before he ever tells you he's a Marine. Like, that's just who he is. You can tell by looking at him. And yeah, another thing I could tell is like he was clearly like the leader of this group, and that's just how he carried himself. You know, like, yeah, you could tell from the first moment you saw him. And so everyone's going around in the circle, you know, introducing themselves, and it gets time to get to Cap. And first of all, everything he says, he like speaks with such authority and like just to the point. It's kind of like, I always think it's like I picture a quarterback like in the huddle, like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. Like, he said everything with that type of speech. So he starts like, you know, introducing himself. He's like, you know, my name's Greg. People call me Cap. He's from Michigan, and he'd been in the program 8 months. And, you know, he starts listing off, he's like, I'm a United States Marine Corps tours, and he starts going down this stuff that, like, I don't understand, but it's clearly, like, valuable to him and important to him. And, but then he kind of starts opening up a bit, and he says, you know, he got injured after some injuries, mental and physical, in Iraq. He came home and he had problems, you know, he had PTSD, and it led him to a dark place. And he thought he was going to die in that place, until by some miracle he ended up at that rehab, and he thought that God had brought him there, and that God had saved his life. And he kind of gets into it. He's like new to the whole God thing. You know, he's like, I don't know the verses, I couldn't tell you everything, but I think there's something to it. And yeah, so he's saying this, and then he says, now this might sound kind of weird, but you know, this is a tight-knit group, and we love you, and we care about you, and if you ever need anything, you know, don't hesitate. And I think immediately I'm kind of like, I'm curious. I know that people say those things, and it's almost like the thing to say. But I could tell that he meant it, and I could tell that he was serious about it. But I think there were like some contradictions, you know, like this soldier, this Marine, like is saying, you know, he's opening up first of all, but he just told me he loves me. And yeah, so I'm a little taken back, but to me I was like, okay, maybe that's like an indication that like something real happened in his life. He doesn't quite know how to explain it, but this is what's happening from that. Like, this is his attempt to, you know, like give back. But yeah, so, but for me at the time, I didn't know what to think. I think I was going through a pretty dark time. You know, after like years of sobriety and living clean and living this new life, yeah, I had fallen, and I fell hard. And it's crazy how like one moment of like weakness and vulnerability, yeah, you can make a decision, and all of a sudden, like addiction, it's got its teeth sunk in you so far, and yeah, almost immediately I'm back in the addiction, and it's worse now than it was before. Yeah, there's a lot of shame with that, a lot of guilt. I think when I first, like, you know, you find out, like, I was naive and I was young, and you know, you don't know, like, this injury is going to lead to this thing, you taking this prescription is going to lead to this dependency, and you don't realize that it's going to lead to what it does. But to fall back into it after I had all the information, it was like confusing to me, and I disappointed myself. And dude, I knew how much work I'd put in. I knew like the years in the grind, and it was like, you know, God enabled me to crawl out of this hole, but that's what I was doing. And then so to go back, it was devastating. Yeah, you just don't know if you like, I didn't think I had the energy to do it again. So yeah, I was devastated. I was in this really hard position, and but I don't think it's a coincidence that, you know, I was placed in this dorm next to this guy who like embodied strength. You know, like that's who he was. Like he was a Marine, and pain is weakness leaving the body, you know, and like that's who he was, and like that's how he spoke, that's how he felt. And you know, yeah, so I'm living in the same dorm with him. I end up like, I start working with him. We spend all the time together, eating meals together, but so you're kind of picking up on stuff and kind of seeing things. And yeah, we kind of start having this connection and maybe even a friendship. And the funny thing about Cap is like, yeah, so one of his jobs in the military, he was like a drill instructor. So he almost like can't help but to like push you and yeah, push those around him. Yeah, I remember one time I was going for a run out back, and you know, he sees me running and he said, "You call that running? Let's go." And like something in me like, dude, you don't want to disappoint this guy. Like, yeah, I think maybe as men, like there's something in you, like all of us want to be soldiers. And here's this like soldier who was a drill instructor. He's like encouraging me and pushing me, and yeah, I think I really enjoyed that. And he was like infectious. And it wasn't long before literally our whole dorm, we're doing push-ups every time we see him, every time we get together as a group. And like I said, he was a drill instructor, so we'd see him, he'd be like, "Toes on the line. Exercise is push-ups, and we will do many of them." That was his way of saying like, don't even get caught on a number. Like we're gonna be doing a lot of them. Like even you having a number like would allow you to rest in your own mind, but no, we weren't that hardcore. But you know, we'd pick a number. We'd say, all right, we're all doing 40 push-ups, and it was never enough. You know, we'd get to 40, and he would lead the count. You know, 1, 2, 3, 1. And we get to 40, and you know, guys would be dropping off left and right. We could barely do 40 push-ups at a time. But you know, he'd be like, "1 more. 1, 2, 3, 1. 1 more for your country. 1, 2, 3, 2. 1 more for your mother. 1, 2, 3, 3. He said, 1 more because you're fat and out of shape, Kernowski. 1, 2, 3. It was like the drill instructor in him. Like he would always say my last name wrong, like on purpose. But yeah, it was funny. He didn't pull any punches either. And I think that's something that, yeah, I loved about Cap. Is like he would tell you how it is. And we had this thing where, well, let me say that being around like addiction, and he was familiar with it too. There's this thing that happens, and we all saw it happen, where someone they would fall back into it, and yeah, they would isolate, and they would disappear, and suddenly like this person that you love and you care about, and man, you share these like intimate moments, and like, man, you tell them anything. They become your family. And suddenly they're just gone. And you can't get a hold of them. And your mind like runs away with it, and you almost expect the worst. And maybe you hear little things about them too, like, "Oh, I heard he's not doing well," or like, "He's did this." And I've had some buddies you like hope, man, you almost hope that they end up in jail just to like stop the bleeding. And so you would know that they were safe. But Cap would always tell me, like I said, he was a drill instructor, he'd get like an inch from my face, and he would say, "If you ever go back, if you ever, I will hunt you down and drag you back here." And he would, you know, joke about being in the military and how he had a very unique set of skills, and that he would find me. And it became like this running thing, you know, every time I wouldn't even see him coming, and he'd be right there, and he'd be like, "I will hunt you down. And yeah, it became like this running joke between us, but our relationship would grow, and it really kind of started growing. We'd play basketball against each other, and before I knew it, every night after dinner we were running to the court, and we couldn't wait to play. And I don't think I ever went up against someone who was as tough as Cap, and I got to see this side of him, his grit and his determination. And man, that warrior in him would come out on the court. And yeah, it was cool. And our bond kind of really strengthened out there. But, I look back and I think to myself, how did we get so close? And why was he so open to me? And, why did he bring me under his wing the way he did? And I think that Cap could sense something was going on with me. And I think he knew that I was carrying a burden. And looking back, I think he could sense it because he knew a thing about carrying some burdens. And he knew, I think he could see that and sense it. And I was. Man, I'd gone through this thing. I was already struggling and felt guilt and shame with, relapsing and going back. And that tore me up, but there was something a little deeper, and it was that I had overdosed. And I hadn't told anyone. And and it's crazy how you can be surrounded by people, but still feel alone, and feel like you can't, talk about these things. And I'd overdosed, and it was terrifying. It shook me to my core to know that there's no safety net. I shouldn't be here. You don't get a second chance. And I was terrified. I was terrified to know that I was there, I was at death's door. I experienced it. Ooh, and it was traumatizing. I feel it was crazy. To give you some sense of what I was going through, and how scary this was for me, I'll tell you this. I've never shared this before, but the night it happened, it was in some motel in the hood, in the ghetto. And unfortunately, it kind of comes with the territory. And so I'm in this hotel room, and just to give you a sense of who's there and why, there's this is a room specifically meant for dealing, and there were dealers there, and there was, I guess what I'll call him a runner, okay? But it's a guy who's basically addicted to drugs, and he's the one who brought me there. And in exchange for bringing me there, he gets more drugs. And he's also the guy who's he's bringing anything he can to the dealer to try to get more. Like, he's the guy who's taking your lawnmower and your stereo system, and he brings it to the dealer hoping to get something in return. But I remember waking up and I was in the bathroom of this motel room, and I open the door and I step out, and they're all there, and they look up, and the looks on their faces confirmed everything that I had felt. Like, they looked up at me like they just saw a ghost. And I knew it. I felt it. They were looking up at me like this dude was dead. And I'm pretty sure they left me in there, like, thinking I was dead. But I remember walking out, I see their faces, and I'm like, I'm literally in shock. And I go and I sit down in this chair, and I'm just sitting there like, it happened. Like, what happened? I died. Like, I know it. I felt it. And yeah, I'm in shock. And as I'm sitting there, like, commotion starts to happen. And the runner, he's asking for more. He's like, hey, like, let me get some more. And the dealer's like, all right, let me get some money. Knowing that the guy doesn't have any money. And he's like, yeah, I just hooked you up. I'm bringing this tomorrow. I'm good for it. And, the dealer, you're not getting nothing unless you got some money. And it starts to escalate. And it's getting loud. And they start arguing back and forth. And it's getting louder and louder. And now they're literally yelling, screaming. Everyone's standing. I'm still just sitting there like, compared to what I had just gone through, like, this is almost irrelevant. Like, I think I was more annoyed than anything. I'm just like, which just shows you, like, the state of everything. Like, I'm in the ghetto, they're screaming at each other. And the runner, he starts to feel like his back is against the wall, like he's being ganged up on. And he takes out a knife, and he holds it by his side, like, basically, like, he's going down fighting. He's going down swinging. And I'm watching this whole thing. And the dealer's like, I don't know what you're going to do with that. Like, we got guns. Like, and I'm paraphrasing, by the way. It was a lot more hardcore. But, so now they're screaming back and forth. And another person picks up the phone, calls the front desk of the motel. And he's like, you better come down here, send security, come get this guy, or you're gonna need body bags in this piece. Like, we're about to, and I'm just sitting there like, all right, this is nuts. Like, I've just had enough. And I get up, and I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. And I go to leave, and this guy's standing in front of the door. He takes out a knife, pulls it, puts it square in my face. And he said, you ain't going nowhere. And yeah, I remember the craziest thing is I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at this knife, and I felt nothing. Like, my heart wasn't beating faster. I wasn't sweaty. I wasn't nervous. I'm a nervous guy. But compared to what I had just gone through, like, this didn't touch what I had just experienced. Knowing, like, that I was there. I wasn't there. I experienced it. I felt it. And the feeling that it was is, you ever go, to like a balcony or maybe a cliff, or like you look over the edge and you get that feeling, and and something in you, oh. But to take it a step further, imagine someone grabs your shoulder, and they kind of shake you, just to mess with you, to scare you, And now that feeling that you get when you looked up, it's like, it's a jump scare. And it goes a little more intense. But the feeling was that, but it was fully realized. It was like completed. Like, it was, I think I'm gonna die. I think I'm gonna die. I think I'm gonna die. Oh my gosh, I'm dying. I'm dead. And I felt it. Yeah, I experienced it. And so to have this knife in my face and this guy, I felt death. And this couldn't compare to it. And I'm not stupid. And like I said, I was in shock, so I even made light of the situation. And I said, I was like, I was actually just thinking I wanted to hang out a little bit longer. I think I'll probably sit over here. And he said, yeah, I bet you will. And I sat down, and things settled down, and I remember leaving. But the scary thing wasn't to know that I was dying. It was that, so I always associated addiction with my past life, my old self, with sin. And so to think that I had died, this is what I'm thinking, I died in sin, which means one thing. It means eternal separation from God. That's hell. That's a lake of fire, weeping and gnashing of teeth forever. And so to know that I was there. The Bible talks about death catching you by surprise, that it comes at you like a thief in the night. And I knew it, I was there. I can't tell you why I woke up, but it was so terrifying to me and so earth-shattering. And so for the next few months longer, I walk around as a shell of myself. I'm haunted by this thing. Every person I talk to, I'm first of all, I wouldn't even be talking to you. I should be dead. This conversation, it doesn't even matter because I died. And you think then it would be family. It's how soon would you have had to move on? How quick would everyone's life have gone back and I'm just gone, forgotten, in hell. Yeah, that was terrifying to me. And so one day I'm playing basketball with Cap. And we got to be good friends, so I feel like I can open up to him and talk to him, and I'm just dude, am I ever gonna be okay? Will this go away? And that's when Cap told me that story about him approaching those front lines, being on the gun, the song, and Cap didn't share that story because he wanted to be cool or entertaining. he was like showing me the heaviness of war and the reality that for his adult life, he had been programmed to do one thing, trained to do one thing, and that thing was dark. It was necessary. Man, he fought for us, for our country. To survive. He genuinely, he fought for his brothers. He fought for the guy next to him. But he had turned on a switch that he couldn't turn off. And he had talked about this, that in war, through fighting, it birthed something inside him towards the enemy, like a certain hatred, like a real hatred. And he couldn't shut it off. And he talked about his initial difficulties coming home. And being from Michigan, he's in Detroit. And he's saying everyone looks exactly like the people we're fighting against. And he's having a hard time, like, turning that switch off. And that he was carrying this burden that he, like, never knew if it would go away. And then now, he was living this new life. And he didn't want to carry that anymore. Man, like God was doing a new thing. And he didn't want to hate. And he talked about how in his quiet place, like when it's just him and God, that he was able to like lay this at the altar. He laid this in front of God. And that for the first time, like peace had entered and hope. And that like he might have even been able to forgive. And yeah, and I think his like openness and sharing, and he would share it publicly, so you don't feel like I'm sharing too much, but he would share it publicly, and like his openness, it allowed me to like first start believing like, oh, like first of all, God's faithful. And I can like bring this to him, and that he won't like leave me the way I am. And man, that was so freeing. Yeah, and hope entered my picture. But it was a cool thing to watch Cap, watch this hardened soldier, you know, soften in front of your very eyes and like start to come out of his shell. And one of my favorite things is like getting Kat to laugh. And he was mostly just laughing at me, seriously. But like we played basketball one time. I don't want to say he's a hack, but he plays hard, you know, like for real. And we're playing. We're battling, and he smacks me, and it knocks my finger out of socket. You know, it's like sideways. And I'm sitting there like, oh, like freaking, I start freaking out, like, oh, Cap, like asking him, like, dude, fix this, like pull this. And like he's looking at me, and he just starts dying laughing. Like here he is. He had previously told me a story about like being in this Humvee, going over this IED, explosive device, and it like topples, and he's pulling people out of the Humvee, and there I am like squealing about my finger, like oh, and yeah, so he popped it back in, but he never let me live that down, and he would just he'd make fun of me all the time, but yeah, it was that, and I will hunt you down, and like he kind of got a kick out of that. But I remember one time we got to work together, and we worked this event. It was like this concert, and we had done something like this before. What you would do is like, you help set up, you go see the show, and you help break down. And it's fun. There's like a group of us that go. There's like 20 of us that all go. And Cap, when it comes to work, he is all business. Like, he is not messing around, especially if there's like people in the public there. Like, he is 100%. Which is funny because like they had like, okay, they have their crew that travels with the band, and then they have people like us, like volunteers. They call them stagehands. And before you knew it, Cap is like basically second in charge next to the guys that work there. Like, that's how good of a worker he was, and like natural. Like, he just somehow, like, the head instructor is working with Cap over his own guys. And so I kind of thought it'd be funny to like tag along, you know, like next to Cap, just because like I can be serious for about 2 seconds. And yeah, so I'm kind of following him around and just kind of joking with him the whole time. And he's working hard. And I'm working hard too, but I'm kind of messing around. And what we were doing this, like, there's this giant screen. It was like a giant TV, but it was made up of like smaller TVs, like these panels. And we're hanging these panels, right? And it's a whole process. They like have this crane, and like, you know, the guy at the top is talking with the guy below. They're all talking on the walkie. They're doing this stuff. And, you know, the head guy, it's all about safety. So he's like, you know, B4 to B5, going up. And he's kind of got to announce it. And yeah, I'm kind of messing around. And after he announces it, I'm like, B4 to B5, going up. So I like make my own announcement. And like I see the head guy, he kind of looks at me like, kind of side-eyed, like, what's happening here? But I see Cat, and like, he was like, a smile starts to break out in his face. But he did not want to show me that he was like, thought it was funny. But I kind of knew that I had him. And you know, a couple minutes go by, and it's like, B6 to B7, going up. So I do it again. B6 to B7, going up. And now Cat, like, he starts laughing. The head instructor kind of starts laughing, like, yeah. So, so now, yeah, it's a little more relaxed. I got Cat, he's laughing. A couple minutes go by, and, you know, it's B7 to B8, going up. And I look at Cat, and he looks at me. And we both say at the exact same time, B7 to B8, going up. And now, like, everyone just starts dying laughing, like, Cat, you know, this guy, now he's joking around. And like, that just, like, the floodgates broke. And like, before you knew, by the end of the night, literally, you have 30 guys. Every time the instructor would say something, trust going up, there's 30 of us all back there. Trust going up. And yeah, it just became this thing. But it was cool to see him, like, now he's joking with everyone, you know, like, now he's a part of this group in a different way. And yeah, it was something special to see. It was pretty funny, but yeah, time went on, our relationship grew, but it was time for the next chapter. And Cap was gonna go. He had this opportunity to go, like, coach high school football, which is, if you knew Cap, it's like right up his alley. It was perfect. And you know, he also was going to go back home and take care of his dad, who had some medical issues. But he was happy to have the time to spend with his father. And I was excited for him. Like, he couldn't wait for this guy's future. Like, he was already in talks with like wounded warriors and these vets to go like, yeah, connect. And man, Cap loved being a Marine. And he had so much pride in that. And yeah, we'd go on these rallies and he would get up and he would share his testimony, his experience, and how like, man, God pulled him from depression, from PTSD, from that hate that was in his heart. And after, dude, anyone who was associated with the military would flock to this guy. Yeah, and he loved being able to point people towards Christ and this new hope that he had. So I like couldn't wait. I was excited to see what God was going to do in his life. And yeah, like, you know, sometimes if life takes some unexpected turns. And yeah, that's what happened. And Cap's father passed away way sooner than we thought. And yeah, Cap took it really hard. It was like his best friend. And he was, you know, getting a second chance to like, at life, you know, like rekindle things with his father. Yeah, and you hear these, you know, word kind of travels fast. And you hear like, hey, Cap's not doing the best. It went from Cap's not doing good to like, we can't get a hold of Cap. Like, he's gone. And yeah, your mind jumps to that worst case scenario. But all I can hear is like, in Cap's own words, I will hunt you down. You know, I'm gonna drag you back here. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you know, I got a unique skill set of my own. Like, I'm gonna find him. I'm gonna do this. And yeah, so I did some digging. I did my own research, and I went to the place where I thought he would be. And I see his truck. And so I go to the door and I'm knocking. No one's answering. And I'm kind of going around the house. I'm looking at all the windows, seeing shoes, I'm seeing stuff. And I get to the bedroom and I'm like, I didn't think this through. Yeah. And man, I see a leg on the bed. And my heart just drops. And I'm knocking. Nothing. And all of a sudden, the leg moves. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God. And yeah, he gets up and you can tell he's waking up and he's frustrated. You know, he's got his mean Marine face on. But he sees me like in the window, like, hey, it's me. And yeah, he opens the door, gives me a big hug. Yeah, it was great to see him. Yeah. And yeah, he was using, and I knew that. But the funny thing about addiction is, like, after the first time, you're using to feel normal. So, you know, I almost like couldn't notice like if it was bad or not. I mean, anytime someone's using that stuff is bad, but you know, I'm saying when you come from that and you don't know what to say, you know, what do you say? You know, this is a guy you'd look up to, you love, who was like a leader, who was instrumental in being there for you. Like, what words could I say to him? And so, and what you know, I always just try to remind people, like, this, unfortunately, this happens, it seems like all the time, but it's just to remind people, like, there was a time when we were okay. Like, life it wasn't maybe going the best, but it was manageable, and we were clean, and we were sober, and we were doing it together. And we were laughing. We would work hard, but we would laugh. And yeah, I just try to remind him of that. But he was heartbroken, you know, and he had new doubts, and like he didn't have the same hope as he did before. And so yeah, it was hard to see. But like I said, I've kind of been around it. And you pray and you hope. And yeah, I remember giving him a big hug. We got to spend the day together. We laughed and ate. And yeah, I'm going to leave. I give him a big hug. I get to tell him I love him. And we're saying like, dude, God didn't bring us this far to leave us like this. You know, I reminded him of what we had gone through and the things he overcame through Christ. Yeah, and I left, and yeah, I remember one Saturday I'm playing basketball with this group of guys, and you know, we're in between games. I go to check my phone, and yeah, sometimes life can be so cold and it can feel heartless. And I see this text. And it just says, Cap is dead. Ooh. And your heart drops. Yeah, your heart drops. And then I hear, yo, you coming? And I remember I'm playing basketball with this group, and I set my phone down, and I'm back in the game, running. And just like that, like I'm alone again. And you're surrounded by people, you're interacting. But it's like that same thing, like they don't know. Oh, it's devastating. Yeah, I was heartbroken and confused, and I was mad. I was mad at Cap. I was mad at God. Dang it. But also, like, I understood. Like, that should have been me. Like, who would have got that text? That same, like, heartless text. Yeah, I get it. I get what he was going through. And I did not want to go to that funeral. I've shared before, like, yeah. But I felt this, like, overwhelming nudge, like this urge, like, you need to go. Like, you need to go to this. And I went. And I'm thankful I did. The place was packed, and I got to see another side of Cap. I got to see his impact and like how he affected the people around him other than just me. And there were like former players there from when he was a coach. There were coaches. Felt like the whole community was there. And it was cool. There were so many Marines there. And they traveled from all over the U.S. to be there. And yeah, I learned how like decorated of a Marine he was. That like things he was too humble to ever talk about. Yeah, I guess he was a sergeant, which means he like led troops. He was like his squad leader. And he had been on this squad, or these troops, whatever you call them, that they were one of the first to go into Iraq. And it was called Project Iraqi Freedom. And they were like the first to approach Saddam Hussein's castle. And yeah, so he received all these like these achievement medals, and like he was honored. And I found out that, you know, he told me that story, the IED and the Humvee blowing up and flipping out. And he received a Purple Heart from that he never mentioned. Yeah, he had full military honors. And that was cool to see. And yeah, I remember I left feeling relieved. And yeah, there was closure there. And I was thankful to be a part of it and thankful to be there. And I think it allowed me to see things in a different way, to like look back on our relationship in a way that I would not have done if he were still alive. And I got to see how like his openness and like his willingness to submit to God and to lay things at the altar. First of all, to see him when he was alive, this strong Marine, to be fully surrendered to God. He would be in worship on his hands and knees. And you realize like there's real strength in surrender. Like that's the kind of man I want to be. And he got to show me that, like through his actions. He didn't know the words, you know, he was new to it. But man, God worked through him. And man, Cap's favorite verse, he would say it all the time, was no greater love hath this than to lay down one's life for a friend. And I knew he meant that. And he embodied that as a soldier. And he took that after, you know, in his new life. And man, I can't wait to see him again. And yeah, I think the one thing that hurt me about leaving that funeral was that, you know, I felt like his family and people around me would never know what he meant to me. And would never know like the good things he did for me. Man, so I'm honored to share that today. Like to be able to honor my friend. Yeah, who honored me. And I hate crying in every video, by the way. What the heck, you know? Yeah. Yeah, I love you guys, huh? Come on. I'll talk to you soon.